Hey everybody, it's Jason Shadrick with Premier Guitar, and we are here with another episode of PG Jams, and luckily we have brought the entire Andy section of the infamous Stringdusters. I don't know who the section leader is for the Andys.
He's first chair.
First chair, Andy. Okay, so we have Andy Falco here on guitar, Andy Hall here on Dobro, and we are going to have them do some picking and playing and singing, and we're going to answer some questions. And we're going to make stuff up as we go along. So first, we're going to have you guys kick it off with a tune. What are you going to play first?
This is one called I've Lived a Lot in My Time.
You ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
I once was a rover, I once was a rambler. I thought that everything was fine. I once had a mansion and lived in my glory. I've lived a lot in my time. I fought the grim reaper down in the dark valley. I prayed when the sun wouldn't shine. I've looked through the bars of a cold, lonely prison. I've lived a lot in my time. I've worked in the cornfield, I've picked fields of cotton. I've been down to my last old dime. I once had a sweetheart, but she proved unfaithful. I've lived a lot in my time. I fought the grim reaper down in the dark valley. I prayed when the sun wouldn't shine. I've looked through the bars of a cold, lonely prison. I've lived a lot in my time. When the sun wouldn't shine, I've looked through the bars of a cold, lonely prison. I've lived a lot in my time. Yes, I've lived a lot in my time.
All right. Great job, fellas. So you guys are in the midst of a seemingly never-ending tour. I say, as far as bluegrass bands goes, you guys hit the road pretty hard.
So in the midst, you mean like the last 10, 15 years of my life?
Yes, yes.
We are in the midst of that.
You
Are
are
you
in
saying
the
there's
midst of
another
that.
10 or 15 years?
More my point is, it wasn't like you guys were hanging out at the coffee shop down the street and hey, you guys play guitar, come on over and hang out. You guys are rolling through town on this tour, and you have a new album coming out called Rise Sun. So tell us a little bit about that. It'll be out next month.
Yeah, I think this is our 8th studio record. We've done a few other little bits, here and there in between too, but our 8th full-length studio record, all original music. Our last record that we put out we were lucky enough to win a Grammy with, which was awesome. That kind of encourages you to maybe get in the studio and do some writing and come up with something new. So, the writing on this record is really interesting and cool. It has a really uplifting message. A lot of particularly folk music and bluegrass can sometimes be a bit of a downer in the content, but for this one, we've really I guess just the trajectory of our lives and the way we decided to write. It's kind of a lot of uplifting, fun songs.
Not a lot of minor key stuff.
Not a ton. There's a few. We all have our dark side.
Yes.
But
there's some in there.
Yeah, there definitely is. There, it covers the gamut. But there's definitely a theme of some kind of uplifting stuff. A lot of good picking. It's called Rise Sun. That's the name of the single as well. So we're stoked about it. Yeah, really excited.
So I got to ask, how does your musical life change after you wake up the next day after you win a Grammy?
Well, first of all, you get a lot of texts from a lot of friends right away, and that I think it was like, really that got to be like an emotional moment actually, because when you started getting, when people started reaching out, I felt like that was in like our musical community and our friends and stuff. It really was a beautiful thing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you wake up the next morning and it's time to get back to making music and trying to work on what the next record would be and writing and we almost actually right around that time we were in the midst of already started the Rise Sun record. We'd already started pre-production on that.
Yeah, of course, awards or not, you're doing your thing and you're moving forward. But it's certainly a nice moment, and it's cool for our particular style of bluegrass, which is kind of like more like jam rock bluegrass, which a lot of times doesn't get quite as much acknowledgement in the sort of world of maybe critical acclaim or Grammys or IBMA awards or things like that. So I think it was cool for sort of a more fringe type of bluegrass like us maybe to sort of be in the mix in that. And I think a lot of other bands that are in the same boat kind of appreciated that someone from this scene got recognized in that way. But regardless, as Andy said, you're just always moving forward with your writing and playing.
So knowing and Andy's written some columns for us before, some bluegrass ones that are pretty popular on our website. But as far as the collaboration goes between the band, because I know you guys don't all live in the same geographic area, how does that work when somebody's in New York, somebody's in Colorado, somebody's in North Carolina? How do you guys kind of work that out?
Well, we're on tour quite a bit, as you pointed out, throughout the year. And so we really write that time into sort of a tour schedule. Often when we start to work on new material, we may, at the back part of a tour, rent a house somewhere for 3 days, and we just get in. And the process really starts as everybody kind of writes and then brings in what they feel are their best, anywhere from 5 to 6, 7 songs that might fit with the Dusters, and we sort of do a crash through show and tell kind of thing, and just sort of crash through them, record everything just on an iPhone or something, and then we kind of revisit everything once we pass that round. And then there's certain things that for us seems to happen very naturally, where we kind of seem to gravitate towards songs that have similar themes or something, and especially on this album, more than ever maybe, we really zoomed out and we're looking at it as a whole, as a project, as an album, and what's going to be sort of the running themes. And like Andy pointed out, I mean, we all had songs that had sort of an uplifting, for the most part, uplifting types of themes that we felt, we wanted to share with the world. We wanted our record to be more of an uplifting kind of thing, and we feel like the world maybe needs that now. We certainly did, and that's sort of what we're sort of feeling. And to the point where we even sequenced the record before we went into the studio. We had it all sequenced and ready to go, and we recorded the album in sequence over 9 days, and so everything was done in order as it is on the album. So that allowed us to be able to incorporate and bridge sort of a lot of times for us there was the live show and then there's the albums, and in this case it was really a bridge between those two approaches of music. So we were able to connect songs with improvised interludes and stuff like that, because we knew what the order was going to be. We knew where we were going, and so we were able to incorporate that element, which is exciting for us.
Yeah. So when it comes to in the studio recording, traditional with big quotes around it, bluegrass, kind of either all around a mic or all mic'd up acoustically like we're doing today, and you guys are doing it. But I know you guys have delved into the world of pedal boards and in your live show use a lot of different effects that maybe a traditional bluegrass band wouldn't explore. How do you balance that in the studio when you go to record these, between the traditional way of recording acoustic instruments and trying to be more experimental with the the toys and gadgets?
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's a good question. We have consciously tried to incorporate some of that. Although, what seems to happen is, we record live, just with mics, and it's all us just playing together live. You'll try to record the sound of the pedal board a lot of times, and when you're recording in the studio, it just doesn't have the best tone. I mean, you know what I mean? It works great for live in a mix in a club, but recording your pedal board tone in the studio for acoustic instruments, at least for us, hasn't always worked that great. So a lot of times what we'll do is we'll go in with our great engineer producer Billy Hume, who's worked with us on a number of albums, who's a genius in the studio, and if we need a little something, we'll add it after the fact as opposed to recording it live, because to get it live you have to kind of use the pedal board, and the pedal board tone is not that ideal for the studio. So a lot of times it's very raw acoustic initially, and then we'll go in with Billy and be like, can we put I think on the live show I'd probably hit my chorus pedal or my delay here, whatever. So we'll add that usually after, just for tone reasons. So,
and I've done, in the studio, I've actually had my pedal board and taken a signal from it, and mostly what I use, like the most important probably pedal that I use is a delay, because I use it a lot on rhythm stuff, because it adds like another dimension of rhythm, sort of, right? So I've done it before with Billy, where I will run that and I'll set the delay where I want it, so I could hear, it'll inform me like how I'm playing to play that right part, and then he doesn't use that, then he can emulate that delay with the microphone tone.
Right, so you get the effect while it's tracking, because it affects how you play if you hear your own effect, but then it's just like a reference for you, basically. Yeah.
So what's your go-to delay, Andy? That's on your
I
board
use
now?
Let's see, what's on my board right now? I use the Strymon Brigadier.
Okay.
Is that what it's the Brigadier? Yeah. The Strymon stuff is amazing, and it's really clean. And before that, I was using a Electro-Harmonix Memory Boy, which I really like and actually use on my electric board now. But the thing is, with so much sort of tap dancing, because, as you're working the effects, the Memory Boy has like some dials that sometimes are easy to nudge and hit with your foot. And so, that was one of the reasons why I took, but it's a good sounding one. But the Strymon stuff is really
I use
amazing.
the timeline and the Mobius for filter stuff, flange.
Is that Strymon too?
I use a flange effect quite a bit. I used to use an auto wah a lot, or not a lot, but for certain funky things. But this actually, the flange I've kind of developed on the Strymon Mobius is like even better for that type of rhythmic kind of chunk. It's really cool.
Yeah.
So when you talk about using delay in bluegrass rhythm, how do you set your delay? If somebody wanted to experiment with that at home, how would you?
I actually just set it with like quarter notes.
Quarter notes, okay.
And I usually depending on the songs, but I usually just kind of tap quarter notes. And I like to use the like the analog delay style and I set it so that there is some degrading, or whatever as it, but and the reason why I do that is because it differentiates tonally, so it kind of it doesn't get as clear, which is, I think, good for the delay, because then you can hear the main notes better. And a lot of times, I wouldn't really use it on like a straight, bluegrass rhythm, but a lot of the stuff we do might be like, those kinds of rhythms, like downbeat rhythms and percussive rhythms, where I want to, and I'll set it so that you really hear the decay of it. Maybe you might get like one or two sort of repeats, but then after that you almost can't hear it too much. But you have to be careful with the delay too when you're playing rhythm, because depending on how the changes are, if they're real fast changes on a song, sometimes that delay can clash with your, But but I use it quite a bit, actually. A lot of times when I'm, playing rhythm and someone's jamming, it just, because when somebody, say Andy Hall's starting to, lead a jam, and he's soloing. With a band like ours, 5 pieces, you lose a part of the rhythm. So I'm trying to, that maybe in a way it kind of adds like another rhythmic piece almost to the whole thing. So I try to, but usually that's kind of, I set it into quarter notes
with just a little bit of feed, like maybe a couple repeats.
Yeah,
usually?
yeah, with a few repeats. So, but I want it to kind of repeat smoothly. I don't want it to just, so it just gives a little bit of space in it, but it also adds like can add a rhythmic pattern. Some of the songs, we've done where, it's like on we do this song called Summer Camp, where like the rhythm part that I'm playing acoustically is actually. But when I have the delay set, it kind of gives a little bit of an extra sort of rhythmic thing that actually syncopates with my part. And Andy Hall is playing also a chop part on that. So between the 3 parts, it really gives this like syncopated, almost, and you're kind of creating a drum kit. And the bass is playing the kick drum basically.
And speaking of rhythm guitar, Andy Hall, I have a lot of questions about how exactly. What's kind of behind the overview of the art of Dobro rhythm guitar?
Yeah.
So
sure.
It's very percussive.
Yeah.
And so can you just give me like a quick breakdown for somebody who's not a Dobro player about how you approach playing rhythm?
Sure. Well, I had to develop it. We, originally we did have a mandolin player in the band, and then when he left, it's been 7-8 years. There was a big rhythmic element of the sound that had to be compensated for,
And that chop in bluegrass bands is like the snare drum.
Right, the backbeat chop. So on bluegrass songs, it's just a chunk, it's pretty simple. It's, and on its own it doesn't sound like much, but in the context, you're adding that snare hit, essentially, the backbeat. But on other songs, so I've had to, we do a lot of non-bluegrass rhythms. It could be a rock rhythm, it could be a funk rhythm. And so I've had to develop a way to also add like the backbeat rhythm element to like a funk tune, like, so I have a way that the way you almost would with a flat pick, I strum forward with the thumb pick and then back with one of the metal picks, or I'll even go forward and backward just with the thumb pick and almost grasp it like a pick, and I can kind of go. So I can kind of strum back and forth with the thumb pick and get these, and then I get accents with kind of one of the metal picks. So. So, and there's a number of other sort of strums that I do, but, that kind of strum chop is something that I've really had to develop. And it's not that's not something that you hear a lot. Like, with Dobro, usually it's bluegrass and it's some type of just backbeat chop, but I've tried to develop a whole repertoire of like rhythm chops essentially that I can do that are very specific techniques that I've had to like practice and work on and dial in with the rest of the band, So
can I put you on the spot when you talk about funky rhythm?
Yeah.
Like, how would you guys approach a tune like Get Lucky?
So Get Lucky is interesting. Let's see.
Because you guys did that on one of your records of covers.
We did, on an Undercover Volume 2.
Yeah, that's interesting because it's a lot of minor chords, and so Dobro's tuned to a major chord. So then you're trying to chop, and when you're chopping, I've got the bar across, and it's a major chord, so I figured out ways to mute. I mute one major third with my thumb and one with my ring finger on this hand, and then I get kind of a power chord. So let's see. And so, like for the minor chord, I have to mute, and then when it goes to the major chord, I can do a full strum, and then it goes to E minor, and I have to mute the major notes, and then I can go back to major. So it's
such a sleight of hand when it comes to that, moving that bar around.
Yeah, and that's there's a lot of very dobro specific technique that goes into it that just, when you're in a band, it's like I've never wanted to feel limited by playing the dobro, so I've done everything I can to learn techniques to allow me to do kind of what I want, but it takes a long time.
Yeah. You guys want to rip on another song?
Sure.
All right, what's
you
up next?
Do Old Grimes or
Yeah.
This is a sort of like a fiddle type tune that we learned from a guy I think named Mike Snyder. I think was the one who brought this around. Member of the Grand Ole Opry, but great little fiddle tune. We'll see if we can pull it together here.
This is jam style, so we're just gonna jam it and see what happens.
Thanks
Jam
for the
style.
disclaimer.
Ready? Old Grimes.
So when you guys put out records and you have everything from Daft Punk to Fish or whatever, when you guys were growing up, was bluegrass kind of the first musical path you started to venture, or did you have other stuff that came in before?
Early on, for me, it was Beatles, and but Grateful Dead really was the sort of the beginning of the real heavy trying to play kind of phase.
It was metal for me, honestly. I grew up in upstate New York, and
yeah.
my dad's whole family's from Nashville, and I would go to the Grand Ole Opry as a kid when I'd visit like grandparents, but I was just sort of like, this is boring, And so I was in a metal. My first playing was like, it was like shred guitar, like Joe Satriani and
Long Island guy.
Yep.
Yeah, right. He's Long Island. And like the shred guys, and Metallica and stuff like that. So that's kind of what I was into, and then. So no, not bluegrass.
So how did a metalhead shredder from upstate New York end up with a dobro in the infamous Stringdusters?
It's such a great question, and isn't it funny how things turn out?
Yeah.
Well, like I said, my dad's family is from Tennessee, and they were
Yeah.
big bluegrass and country music people. So I was kind of, I would hear it a little bit. So I think some of those things filtered in a little bit, but then I got a present. Started getting into blues anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I started getting into blues, and I actually asked for. I had heard of bluegrass, and I was just absorbing everything. So I was just like, all right, I don't know. So, for Christmas, I asked for the Bill Monroe box set, and I got it. And to me, when I first put it on, I was like, this is acoustic heavy metal. This is like, Bill, it was fast, it was high energy, musicianship, searing solos on mandolin and banjo and fiddle. And to me, it sounded like raw acoustic metal from the past or something. It was so. It seems like it's a far leap, but the musicianship, the speed, the energy, the excitement of it all, very much related to, and the musicianship required was just something that really interested me. So I pretty quickly got into it, and then I ended up going to Berklee College of Music for guitar. Developed a pretty bad hand problem, tendonitis type problem from just practicing.
What type? Were you studying metal rock guitar at Berklee, or was it more like jazz?
It was jazz.
Yeah.
When you go there, you go through pretty standard. There's like prerequisites, and it's like guitar chords and it's very jazz focused. But then there's other classes you can take that will be more focused on metal. You can choose your private instructor too, and that's kind of where you get your more individualized path,
pick your stylistic path.
And as you move along in the curriculum, there's like the Jimi Hendrix ensemble or the Jim Hall ensemble or the Pat Martino ensemble, whatever. So you can get into, but initially it's just guitar, and it's like you learn chords, you learn scales, you learn rhythm, improvising, all this stuff. So, but anyway, I got a bad hand problem to where I couldn't play guitar, and it was kind of a pretty dark time. I was trying to figure out what to do. I was playing bottleneck slide, and then somebody said, you should check out a lap slide. They're really amazing. It sounds great. And at the same time, I got a cassette tape of a band called Skip Hop and Wobble that Jerry Douglas.
The album's called Skip Hop and Wobble.
The album is called Skip Hop and Wobble. The band was too. They just did one album pretty much. But it was Jerry Douglas, and that when I heard that, it kind of opened my ears to like, oh, you can play jazz on the dobro. You can play it's not just for like blues basic stuff. This is like you can play like anything. So that album was very seminal for me in hearing Jerry sort of expand what I thought was possible on the slide. Yeah. So anyway, and the playing slide didn't hurt my hand. So I fell in love with it. I kind of it all happened like a perfect storm, and then.
Yeah. So you weren't a child bluegrass prodigy at festivals ripping on dobro licks. You were, kind of a late comer to.
Absolutely,
dobro.
Yeah. But I didn't start really getting into dobro till I was probably like 20. So that is late in the bluegrass sense. But what I had done is spent the last 4 or 5 years playing my guitar 4 or 5 hours a day. So I had not only a good musical sense, but just that understanding of how to practice and that drive. Yeah. So I it wasn't like I started at 20. I was going to Berklee. I had a good musical base, and I just had to switch sort of the medium.
Now, did you study with a dobro teacher at Berklee?
There was a bottleneck slide teacher that I took just as a sort of a default, but I was like much far beyond where they were. Yeah. And so I was pretty much learning on my own, ended up getting a production and engineering degree and finishing my musical schooling. Dobro, there was no dobro, anything.
So, Andy, we were talking on the way over here we were kind of geeking out on Mike Bloomfield a little bit and old vinyl. So, when it comes to the Beatles, you also kind of went through a kind of more of electric blues phase early on. Was that?
Yeah, certainly. I was, growing up with my parents, had an awesome record collection, which still exists in my living room now. But, I had a lot of exposure to not only a lot of Beatles stuff, but everything from classical music to there was some country like Johnny Cash and Willie Nelson stuff in there, and there was a Doc Watson record in there. So I grew up, mainly listening when we were kids, ripping apart the Beatle records. But then eventually, yeah, I got into the Grateful Dead, and that sort of led me into the Allman Brothers Band, which to me was like the Grateful Dead. I was like, wow, these guys jam like the Grateful Dead, except it's like a whole different energy. It's like, ferocious version of it. And so I loved that. And then we started diving deeper into like the blues stuff. And I started playing, in bands, and was playing always always had a band or several bands going at once. And then I met some musicians in a local place that I used to play, this little local bar, and these guys would play on Saturday nights, and I was able to get in because I didn't need any fake ID or anything, and because I played there. And I used to watch this guy, Donnie Salenzo, just a local Long Island great guitar player, and it was like something I never heard before. And one of his friends that would go watch him play, who's a dear friend of mine now, Mark, they turned me on to Bloom. They were like, oh, you should listen to some Mike Bloomfield and some Amos Garrett and some, they started turning me on to all these, Buzzy Featon, all these great guitar players from that sort of era. But Bloomfield was something that I really got into, after I got into B.B. King and got into some of the older, Muddy Waters, Robert Johnson, going through that phase. But then Bloomfield sort of, for me, kind of tied a lot of things together, musically, and phrasing and tone and all that stuff. I mean, it was just there's something just really magical about his expression, and so that's kind of what I was doing for years. I didn't really get into acoustic guitar deeply until I was in my late 20s.
Was there something that, like with him getting that box set, was there a point where bluegrass really started to kind of become more prominent in your musical life?
Yeah, so we started doing a gig on every other Sunday nights on Long Island, and my older brother started getting into bluegrass, and he was going up to some bluegrass festivals, and he was always kind of like the tastemaker musically for all of us, And my cousin at the same time actually moved to Ohio, and he was, we were all in New York, or New Jersey, New York, but he moved to Ohio and started getting turned on to bluegrass kind of separately. And then when he moved back, then we started, talking a little bit about bluegrass, and those guys maybe even started, playing a little bit of bluegrass too. And then we started doing this gig every other Sunday, and we started incorporating some of this bluegrass stuff. And I met a guy named Buddy Miriam, who's a local Long Island mandolin player who was friends and learned, directly from Bill Monroe, which is very unusual.
Yeah.
Actually, not too many people had that experience. So he kind of became friends of ours, and we started playing more and more bluegrass. But it was really, then I went up to my first bluegrass festival, which was it's now called Gray Fox, but it was called Winterhawk. And I went up to the hill to meet those guys. They were all hanging there, and I had a gig up there, an electric gig. But I went up the day before to hang with those guys and just see what this bluegrass festival was all about. And we, I got there late, and we, jammed a little bit the night before. And the next morning there was a guitar workshop by a guy named Jack Lawrence. I didn't know who that was at the time, and I just thought, let me go check it out in the morning before I leave. And he, of course, was Doc Watson's, guitar player.
Yeah.
And they would tour together. And so he had Doc with him at the workshop. And I was sitting in front, and I remember looking at Doc and going, that's the guy from my father's record collection that we never really listened to that record, but it was the, it's the Vanguard record, and it was like, that's that guy. Amazing, and I was sitting right in front. I remember Doc was sitting about as far as we are, and I watched them playing, and I just freaked out. I'd never seen anything like it before. And I remember going back up to the campsite, and I said, I got to buy an acoustic guitar. I got to get an acoustic guitar. I want to learn how to do that. So I went, and when I got home, I got an HD 28 or something, and a pickup system, and started trying to dive into it. But for me, it was like really like the Doc thing, and then then you get turned on to, and Buddy had a lot to do with turning us on to a lot of cool Monroe stuff, and of course like Clarence White and the Kentucky Colonels we were listening to a lot of. But it was really like the Doc and Monroe record that there's like the live stuff, the Smithsonian record. Like that was really, and then the Seldom Scene was like a big part of that for us. You know?
Me
Live at
too.
the Cellar Door.
Yeah, Seldom Scene was a big one for me starting out too, because they had Mike Aldridge on Dobro, so it was like, you know, but they were also like at the time kind of one of the progressive bands, you know.
Yeah, they were doing like rock tunes that you
doing
can
rock
like
tunes and
really,
stuff.
you can really relate. You know, from a Long Island kid, you could really relate to the vocal style more. It was like, you know, like the Monroe stuff was amazing, but it was a little bit, you know, it's like it's harsh almost, you know, when you first start to, you know, so the you know, the Scene stuff was like, wow, this is like, you know, it was cleaner recordings and stuff, and it was like, you know, really turned us on to it, you know.
It is tough with some of them older, like when you talk about early Bill Monroe, early Doc Watson. Sometimes the fidelity is like a hurdle you need to climb to be able to, for some people to be able to really appreciate that music.
Totally,
Yeah,
the fidelity and even just the way they play. I mean, that's something really interesting about being in a bluegrass band is feeling like somebody's like alarm is going haywire right now. Is like feeling like when you're in a bluegrass band, like turning people's ears onto the sound of just the banjo and the dobro, you know, especially playing like more like rock type music. It's like you bring in fans that maybe haven't heard a lot of bluegrass, and so I always feel like I like that idea of trying to like turn people's ears to being accustomed to the sound of bluegrass music, because it can be an acquired taste for a lot of people, but once you're in, you're in.
And it's like that with all those,
Except for drummers.
Except for drummers, they're never in.
Well, it's like that with, you know, with blues too, you know. I mean, it's like harder to start with Robert Johnson or Skip James or something, because the fidelity of those recordings, you really have to get past all of that. You know, so you know, sometimes when you listen to the later stuff, it can then bring you in.
It always just seems easier to work backwards.
Yeah.
Funny, because I started the opposite. Like I started with like old Bill Monroe stuff, and it just blew. It was like I felt like an archaeologist. Like I discovered something. I mean, of course I hadn't, but for me I had. You know, and it was like it was just like there was something so cool about the historic element of it. Like it was like a gateway into this whole new world. You know, and I loved that part of it.
Well, the moment for me was I was into the Grateful Dead, and I was listening to a jazz station or something that did a blues show in New York, and I remember very specifically listening to it and heard maybe it was like Samson Delilah or something, and it was like, oh, listen to this is cool, this old blues guy is doing a Grateful Dead song, that's really cool. And then like as I said it to myself, I realized that they were doing his song, and so it was like a moment of an epiphany. It was like, oh, I got to go back on some of this stuff, and that was sort of started the journey going backwards.
So with both of you not starting even on this instrument you're playing currently, or even in the style that you are known for playing, how did you approach learning and internalizing the vocabulary of it? Because you both had a certain vocabulary on electric instruments or shred guitar, but when you fully kind of committed to acoustic bluegrass as a starting point, how did you approach learning that vocabulary?
That, I think, was all of us moving to Nashville, I think, was a big part of that. I mean, we had certainly begun on the journey.
Was this even in the early days of the Stringdusters?
Before pre-Stringdusters.
Okay.
We had all pretty much moved to Nashville to just like do exactly what you're saying, to become better bluegrass musicians and to try and get into the scene and be close to our heroes like Jerry Douglas and Sam Bush and Bela Fleck, who were all living in the Nashville area. So yeah, I mean, it was like basically just a pilgrimage move to go to Nashville, because I was in Boston and he was in New York. We had gotten to where we were pretty, kind of big fish in the small pond. Thought, I'm thinking I'm pretty good. I'm good. I'm the best in my neighborhood at this instrument. Nobody else even knows what it is. And then you go to Nashville and you're way down at the bottom of the pecking order, and the first band I played with was a guy named Harley Allen, who's Red Allen's son, who's a bluegrass legend. This guy's a songwriting legend, and the banjo player in the band was Butch Robbins, who had played in Bill Monroe's band. So the first band I joined when I got to Nashville was with a banjo player who played for Bill Monroe. So getting to jam and play with those people was the way to learn the vocabulary, and having people stop the song and be like, no, that's not how you sing it. Try it like this. And having these people that were the originators of it show you how to do it. It's a very verbal lineage. You can listen and you can watch YouTube videos and you can take lessons and everything, but when it comes to like a traditional specific style, there's almost no substitute for sitting across from somebody and having them literally show you the deal, show you this vocal move on the harmony, this is how you should do that, or this part gets extended at the end of the solo. There's another bit here. You got to play that bit too, And anyway, so it's just
And then they're with you on stage every show.
Yeah.
Looking at you
like no. And then you're embarrassed, and then you go home and practice for 8 hours, and So being absorbed and involved in it, and in Nashville at the time, it was like that was the deal, and I got to play with Earl Scruggs, and so you just absorb that stuff firsthand is the way to do it, and you're just hungry. You seek out all the jams, you seek out all the players, you just do anything you can.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of that, just getting around it as much as possible and listening a lot. And for me, I really changed. I changed my style approach wise, and had to sort of almost felt like I was starting from scratch. And then, and then I went the other way, and then I started realizing that, these other elements that I had learned and other styles that I played were actually, instead of like shying away from them, I started to actually embrace them and want to incorporate them into my playing and make them a part of my sound, regardless, because I'm never going to sound like Tony Rice. I'm never going to sound like Clarence White. I'm never going to sound like any of the any number of amazing bluegrass pickers, there are guitar players that there are out there. I mean, there's like a certain sound that's just not, my DNA is a little bit different, musically. And so I felt I had a moment where I realized that actually allowing all of that in to sound as much like myself as I could was actually an asset and not a problem. That's
right. Like going to Nashville is sort of like that's where you learned the real deal, like bluegrass language. But then after we felt like we'd absorbed a lot of that, then it's like you almost go back further in your own history and think of, maybe that Joe Satriani lick I did, maybe that can come out, or whatever it is. You let your other influences that had kind of been put on the side for a while you did this bluegrass thing, you let them kind of come back in, but you've got this foundation of language for bluegrass to then express all this stuff in, and it's pretty cool.
We all played on like, did our time in like traditional bluegrass time. I mean, suits and the whole thing. The hay bales and no water at the festivals and stuff. Just like we did like ultra traditional, bluegrass, and it was great. And it was, we learned, and then, I think one of the things about our band is that we have evolved as a band together. We were at the beginning more in the direction of a traditional bluegrass band, and then we evolved together in this sort of concept of being able to bring in all these other musical elements that were genuine to us, because at the end of the day, I mean, for me personally, I feel like, no one, I'm not going to be able to convincingly sing about a little blue cabin on a hill in Kentucky. I'm from Long Island, so you eventually have to sort of make your own voice and make your and do what's genuine, because I think that's what's the most important part.
Songs about the Islanders?
Yeah, songs about the Islanders winning in the 80s and never again.
Never
maybe
since? Yeah,
right,
okay.
No, but it's like, but it's just really the idea of just kind of becoming more of like a genuine representation of who you are as musically, lyrically, all that stuff. And I think we did that kind of as a band over the course of several years, that now we just feel like we have our own sort of sound.
Cool. Well, let's kind of wrap up here. I want to talk to you guys about the guitars and the instruments that you brought today. So, Andy, you have a Beard Dobro there.
Yep.
So tell us a little about it, and what's with the whammy bar looking thing over there?
Yeah. So this is my custom Beard E model. It's mahogany. And Paul, when he was going to make me one, he said, I've got this experiment I want to try. And I said, great, I love experiments. So a lot of times a Dobro will have a baffle in here to help guide the sound that rolls around inside the body come out these sound holes. Instead, he put another cone. So the cone is under here. This resonates and makes the Dobro sound. He put another one here just as a sympathetic, like resonating entity here. So as I play, a lot of the sound comes off this cone, but this cone also resonates sympathetically and creates a little sustain and high end that comes out of here. So, and we tested it with and without, and it actually works. So it's kind of a cool. There's not very many of these like this. And then this is a hip shot. So, electric guitar players have been using them for a long time, but I can use it to go from G tuning to D tuning. So D tuning is another tuning that's real. I use it a lot for blues. It's a much lower. Very blues oriented, kind of dark, meaty sound.
Is that just like straight open D?
That's open D.
Yep.
D A D, F sharp A D.
Yep.
And then I can just flip it, and I'm back to G tuning, which is like more like what I use mostly, like for bluegrass and other stuff. So G is like my home base tuning, but for quite a number of songs, I'll flip it to D. And this, I used to take 2 Dobros around, and now I can just pop that. And
is it the GBD, GBD?
GBD, GBD. Yep.
Okay.
So that's the tuning, and so that's the hip shot, and I use a Fishman pickup with an aura, and run it through a number of other bits. I've been using this. I think it's Electro Harmonics 2BQ that creates it really kind of like smooths out the high end for me, because Dobro can sometimes be a little metallic-y sounding, and so this 2BQ kind of adds a really nice element to the tone. So I go from this into the aura, into the 2BQ, and then effects and whatnot. So, but
what are those?
These?
Yeah.
These are the fine tuners. So this is how you tune this when it's an open. It's basically, this is how you
Standard.
find this is without using any of this. And then when you close it, these feet come down and make the new tuning, but I usually fine tune it when it's open, so there's no tension on it. When you put this on it, there's tension on it, and it's hard to actually move these.
Yeah.
So these are the fine tuners. So this is what I use. So if I need to make an adjustment, I can listen and then adjust one of these and just get it fine-tuned. So ideally, when your strings are stretched, you've got this set properly, it should be perfectly in tune when you hit it.
And the tuning that it goes to is fixed. You can't change the tuning that it.
I mean, you could you could do a different tuning if you wanted, for sure. You could make it any other tuning, really.
Are there any other tunings you experiment with or mess around with?
There are, but nothing practical. I might write a song like another good one is like a 9.
Oh, yeah.
And on Dobro, you can do like a bend. So. So, but that's very specific. I would use that on recording, but not for Dusters. So, and the cool thing about Dobro is there are a lot of, and then there's also, there's a 6th tuning I can use where I drop the low G down to an E, and then you've got, so you actually have E minor. It's like a 6 kind of vibe. You got E minor with a G major on the top. So there's a lot of different tunings you can use, but G and D are the big ones.
Cool. So Andy, tell us about your bourgeois here.
Okay, so this is a custom D. They made this for me a little over a year ago. Before that, I was using Collings D1A for 10 or 11 years, actually, and I love that guitar as well. But I wanted, when we started the band, as Andy pointed out, we had a mandolin player in the band, and I wanted the mahogany, like a D1A. And so I wanted now, without, I really wanted to get a rosewood, back inside guitar. So this guitar is kind of custom. It's got all tourified except for the rosewood. So the neck and the braces are all tourified. I like really simple appointments on instruments generally. So
what's tourified?
Tourified means it's like an aging process
Artificial
they
aged,
do.
yeah.
And so, so the braces and the neck and all of it's all, got this age thing, and it actually works. It sounds not quite as green when it's brand new, but it has opened quite a bit since I've had it. Adirondack top, and I like simple appointments. So you notice there's no like herringbone trim, or there's no inlays on the fingerboard. I like everything to be kind of plain as can be, because I like the wood. I like the wood to be sort of the focus of as far as like aesthetics go. And then electronic, and it's just Indian rosewood back and sides. And electronically speaking, I use a Fishman, the Matrix Infinity pickup under saddle, and that comes out of the regular jack, and that goes to an Aura. And the Aura, I use mostly Aura in the sound. I maybe back off it a little bit. And then you see there's another output here, and this is sort of a custom thing because I was using on my Collings an internal microphone, and then in order to get it to power and everything, you had to kind of run. Sometimes you see on old pictures the tape that's running along my guitar. I just had gaff tape and ran the cable outside. But since they were building this from scratch, I had them actually incorporate into the design. So you can see there's a Shure Beta 98 microphone inside, and it kind of sits there, and I have it kind of screwed into one of the braces, and then that goes directly out to this output, its own output. So then this comes out to a wireless pack, this goes to a wireless pack, and then those both go to like I said, the DI side goes to the Aura. The mic side goes directly into and I have a Felix, a Grace Felix. So I use both channels. I use it kind of as a blender. And then I use an effects loop on the Felix that has a few effects. Mainly I have on there a delay. I have an octave, a POG octave pedal, the micro POG, or not the small one, but not the big one. And I have a chorus on there, and I have what else do I have on there? I think that's mainly it. Yeah. Oh, and I have a vibrato on there that I use sometimes.
Okay. What vibrato?
Man, I don't know even the name of that one.
I'll
I've had
take
it
a
for a
picture.
while. Yeah, it'll be in the picture. I should know, but I just can't think of the name of it. They've been on that's been on for so long, but I don't use it too much. But with an acoustic guitar in a string band, you have to really choose your effects wisely, because not everything works great, because you really want to make sure that the things that you use don't take away from your role. I mean, the guitar has such an important role rhythmically speaking, so you have to use effects that work well with rhythm. And I find that that's why, as we were talking about with the delays, the octave pedal I use mostly just as something I blend a little bit of the low octave in, so on slower tunes I can get a little bit more meat underneath. And I use also I have a distortion pedal on there, the Soul Food.
Oh yeah.
And I use that occasionally just for tunes that, on certain jams where I just want it to, I want to have more sustain and make it soar a little bit more like an electric guitar kind of, But those are like mainly
So neither one of you use much compression?
No, not on the acoustic board. On the electric side I do, but on the acoustic side it just seems to...
I mean, the front of house, plays a big role in our sound too, and so he's definitely using some level of compression,
Yeah.
But yeah, I prefer to have as much dynamic range as possible in what I'm hearing.
You need it, and it's like, even when we're recording, it's like, light compression is usually... If at all, like as far as you being able to hear it, and then afterwards when they're mixing it, sometimes they can do whatever, but and that's the same thing with the front house. But it's like it's not like electric where like compression can be almost like an effect that gives you a whole different, like if you're playing, like country stuff, it's like having that compression a little bit. Really, it's part of the sound and the style. It's really more of a deterrent, I think.
It drives me crazy in acoustic.
Yeah,
sound. I can't
just
do.
Sort of squashes it, and it's not pleasant.
Yeah.
And are you like a lot of bluegrass players and use expensive picks?
I use generally I use these blue chip
Yes.
picks. I use
Yes.
yeah, they are
They're
kind
not
of
as they're not expensive for him, but in general they are.
blue chip. I use I've been moved to the 40s. I was using the 50s for a while. Then I got
Okay.
into the 55s. They have like a Thiele one, which is cool, and I like those. But honestly, I started playing with the 40s. I like a little bit of a snap to the pick these
I
days.
noticed there's, when you're picking, there's a fair amount of pick that's sticking out
Yeah.
from your fingers.
Yeah, and I like to get a little bit of real estate on the pick and get like a little bit of snap, But and when I record a lot, I'll either use a blue chip or actually when we do recordings in the studio, I have a whole kit of picks that I lay out. And I have a ton of tortoiseshell picks actually that I made from antique tortoiseshell stuff. And I have various thicknesses, some thin. I have my blue chips I have with all various thicknesses. I also use cheap, thin picks and stuff because sometimes for a certain rhythm part, that maybe it's like kind of Irishy or something, you want to have that percussiveness of the pick. And so a slow ballady tune, I'll use a big fat tortoiseshell pick. And I think it really affects the sound. But as far as like an overall pick for live, nothing to me beats these blue chip picks.
I think that's a pretty underrated part of the signal chain when it comes to guitar players. If you want to change your sound quickly, just go buy 15 different picks.
It really
And
changes everything.
Literally just do everything the exact same, just swap out a pick, and it's pretty surprising.
Yeah, and I would argue that you wouldn't really notice a difference tonally between a tortoiseshell pick on a live sound system between a tortoiseshell pick and something like a blue chip. But in the studio, those details really do change a lot. And so every pick has a sound. But I would go with blue chips definitely.
Dig it. Well, thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day to come up and visit us. And why don't we close this out with the tune?
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us, man. Yeah, we'll do a tune that we both have known for a long time from the Jerry Garcia Band days. Little Deep Ellum
That's
Blues.
right.
How about? All right.
When you go down to Deep Ellum to have a little fun, have your $10 ready when the policemen come. Whoa, sweet mama, your daddy's got them Deep Ellum blues. Well, whoa, sweet mama, your daddy's got them Deep Ellum blues. Well, once I had a girlfriend and she never lied to me. She went down to Deep Ellum, now she ain't what she used to be. Whoa, sweet mama, your daddy's got them Deep Ellum blues. Well, whoa, sweet mama, your daddy's got them Deep Ellum blues. $20 ready when policemen come. Oh, sweet mama, your daddy's got them deep Ellen blues. Well, oh, sweet mama, your daddy's got them deep Ellen blues. Well,